You know, when our culture talks about waking up to a systemic illusion, we we almost always invoke the Matrix.
Right, it's the ultimate go-to metaphor.
Exactly. You know, you take the red pill, you see the falling green code, and you realize the world around you is just a total fabrication.
Yeah.
But the source material we are diving into today, well, it argues there is a myth operating on a far more devastating frequency. And it's not a sci-fi blockbuster. It's Pinocchio.
Which sounds wild at first, right?
Totally. Because while The Matrix is about the terrifying discovery that you live in a fabricated world, Pinocchio is about the brutal, intimate reckoning of discovering you have a fabricated self.
Yeah, that is the core of it. We are doing a deep dive into a really intense forensic analysis of the adoptee experience today.
And it's a heavy one, but so important.
It is. But I want to say, the framework in this text is going to shatter the way we think about almost anyone's identity.
Absolutely.
The essay is called The Pinocchio Archetype, a forensic analysis of adoptee awakening and objectified identity. And what's amazing is that instead of looking at the adoptee experience as some kind of psychological pathology,
Which is unfortunately how society usually frames it, right?
exactly, instead of doing that, this text treats the adoptee as a profound expert on objectification. We're looking at how people are constructed as commodities, what that actually does to the human psyche, and ultimately what it takes to cut the strings.
And I want to say right up front to you, the listener, even if you aren't an adoptee, you really need to hear this.
Oh, 100%.
Because understanding how society imposes what the text calls conditional humanity, like how it demands relentless performance just in exchange for basic belonging, it will fundamentally shift how you see the world around you.
It really gives you a whole new vocabulary for that kind of pressure.
Yeah, I mean, if you've ever felt like your spot in a family or a friend group or a company was entirely dependent on you being the easygoing, unproblematic one, this deep dive is going to put words to exactly what you've been experiencing.
Right. And to really get it, the framework we're using today requires us to look at the invisible systems behind the fairy tale. We have to start by looking at the mechanics of creation.
Right, so where does a fabricated identity actually begin? Because in a traditional narrative, identity starts with lineage, you know? It's an organic continuation of history.
Yeah, it's biological.
But for Pinocchio and for the adoptee in this framework, identity doesn't start with biology. It starts with craftsmanship.
It starts in the workshop.
Exactly. Geppetto didn't just wander into his workshop in a neutral state of artistic inspiration to carve a wooden boy. He carved him to fix something. He was in this profound, agonizing isolation.
The author refers to this as the architecture of creation. And if we map Geppetto's workshop onto the systemic reality of modern adoption, it reveals a very uncomfortable foundational truth. The sequence doesn't actually begin with a child. It begins with a systemic vacuum.
Like a void.
Right. That vacuum could be adult grief, it could be infertility, or it could just be this intense, unfulfilled desire for a very specific family narrative.
Basically a giant emotional hole that needs plugging.
Exactly that.
Yeah.
And that vacuum necessitates an act of creation. In the real world, that's the legal adoption or the emotional crafting of the child's role in the home.
Okay, right.
But that act carries a massive unspoken expectation. The object, the child, is brought in to perfectly fill the shape of that carved space.
So they don't arrive as a blank slate?
No, not at all. They arrive as a targeted solution to a pre-existing condition.
I read that part and I immediately thought it's like being hired for a lifelong job you never applied for.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Right. And the only job description is make me stop hurting. Okay, let's unpack this a bit. How does that actually play out in a living room? Because realizing you were created to be a bomb has to just mess with a person's interiority. Living in that reality on a subsonic embodied level has to be incredibly heavy.
Just think about the psychological vigilance that requires. A child in this dynamic learns very quickly that their presence in the ecosystem is predicated entirely on utility.
Wow.
Like Pinocchio entering Geppetto's domestic sphere, the adoptee is brought in to play the missing child.
So what happens when that child naturally feels sad or angry or just disconnected?
Well, they recognize, often subconsciously, that expressing those messy emotions might trigger the adoptive parent's original grief.
Oh, wow. So if the kid cries, the parent panics because the solution isn't working.
Exactly.
So the kid just swallows the sadness to protect the parent.
That is the mechanism entirely. The
Right.
child's own complex interior life is rendered completely secondary.
It's pushed aside.
Right? It's fundamentally subordinated to their primary systemic function, which is to seamlessly inhabit the mold carved by adult desires.
That is so intense.
And the brutal insight of this first stage of awakening is realizing that you were never the subject of your own origin story. You were the object that resolved someone else's plot.
You were the object that resolves someone else's plot. Honestly, that gives me
It's
chills.
a heavy realization.
It is, because it completely strips away the intrinsic human agency we just assume everyone is born with. But obviously, a kid doesn't stay in the living room forever. Eventually, this perfectly carved solution to a private grief enters the public world.
They go out into society.
Right, they go to school, family gatherings. How does the rest of the world react to them?
Well, the world puts them on a stage. In the text, this dynamic is perfectly captured by Stromboli's theater.
Okay, Stromboli.
Stromboli represents society's transactional relationship with the objectified identity.
Because in the fairy tale, Pinocchio goes out into the world and he's an absolute sensation. He's this living, breathing marvel, dancing without strings.
Generating massive applause.
Yeah, massive applause and massive profit for Stromboli. But the very second the show ends, Stromboli doesn't give him a warm bed or a seat at the table. He locks him in a cold iron birdcage.
This is what the author calls the transactional script.
Hmm.
The dominant culture demands that adoption be framed exclusively in terms of salvation, luck, and unmitigated rescue.
Right. Society loves the idea of the rescued child.
They do. And adoptees are publicly applauded for it, but there is a major catch. They are only applauded when they perform this script flawlessly.
Meaning they have to constantly smile, express relentless gratitude, and prove that the system works.
Yes, they have to exhibit successful assimilation. They must validate the system's benevolence at all times.
Let me throw an analogy at this to see if I'm tracking, because it feels a lot like a toxic corporate culture.
Oh, I like where this is going.
It's like when a company names you Employee of the Month, they give you a shiny plaque, and everyone claps for your productivity. But the second you ask for mental health leave because you're burning out, management threatens to fire you. The plaque is the applause, but the denial of your humanity is the cage.
That is a perfect parallel.
Yeah.
The system is perfectly happy to celebrate your outcome, but it refuses to accommodate your actual needs.
Right.
And in the adoptee framework, those needs often include the very real grief over maternal separation, anger at identity erasure, or just a natural curiosity about their biological lineage.
So what happens if the adoptee actually points to the cage? Like, what if they stop dancing, look at the audience, and say, hey, I'm actually really struggling with the fact that I don't know my biological history?
The system's response is swift and punishing. If an adoptee voices this internal reality, society immediately reframes that clarity as a defect.
They turn it around on them.
Exactly. The text points out how insidious this is. The system pathologizes the adoptee's critique as personal dysfunction, maladjustment, or sheer ingratitude. We gave you a home, and this is how you repay us.
Oh, man. It's the ultimate gaslighting. You say, I'm literally locked in an iron cage, and society says, no, you're just broken. Be grateful you get to dance for us. The text has this incredibly piercing insight here. The cage isn't a punishment for failing to dance well. The cage was always there. The applause was merely a distraction to keep you from noticing the bars.
The transaction was set from the very beginning: perform for our comfort or be locked away. Believing the applause meant you were free was the illusion.
Which perfectly sets up the next layer of this myth. Because if society is the theater demanding a performance, who actually makes the rules? Who enforces the standard of what makes you real?
And this brings us to the Blue Fairy.
Now hold on, because as a kid watching the Disney movie, I always thought the Blue Fairy was the good guy.
We all did.
She rescues him. She tells him to be brave, truthful, and unselfish. This is just good parenting, right?
Yeah.
Why is the author saying this character is insidious?
Because the Blue Fairy represents absolute institutional power. And she operates on what the text calls a conditional framework.
Okay.
She holds the one thing Pinocchio desires most, which is baseline humanity, the ability to become a real boy. But she refuses to grant it unconditionally.
Wait, let me break that down. Are you saying she holds his literal humanity hostage behind a moral contract?
Yes. Think about the difference between a natural-born child and an adopted child in the eyes of society.
Okay.
For a natural-born child, baseline belonging is just granted. If a biological teenager acts out, gets angry, or makes selfish mistakes, society views it as a phase.
Right. Kids will be kids.
Exactly. Their fundamental right to exist within their family is never legally or emotionally renegotiated.
But for the adopted child, it's different.
Entirely different. Because their placement in the family required legal intervention, financial transactions, and the severing of prior biological bonds, Their belonging is implicitly framed as an earned privilege.
That is so heavy.
It is. If an adopted teenager acts out, society doesn't just call it a phase. They invoke terms like bad seed, reactive attachment, or biological determinism. The adopted child must continuously earn their humanity.
Okay, my mind is blown right now. Because society generally views this pressure to be a good, hyper-palatable, high-achieving kid as a virtue. We praise kids who never cause trouble.
We do.
But the text is arguing that for the objectified identity, this isn't virtue at all. It's a desperate survival strategy.
It is the core trauma of conditional humanity.
Mm-hmm.
Waking up to the blue fairy dynamic means realizing you have been running an endless, exhausting marathon just to earn a baseline level of human validity that others receive simply by drawing breath.
Wow.
You are constantly trying to prove you are worth the transaction. And the heartbreaking key insight here is that the Blue Fairies test was never actually about your character. It was always about your compliance.
It's exhausting just thinking about it. Running a marathon where the finish line keeps moving based on how comfortable you make the people in power feel.
Exactly.
But no one can run forever. I mean, human beings aren't built for endless compliance. So what happens when the burden of performing this conditional humanity becomes physically and emotionally unsustainable?
You deviate. You seek relief outside the sanitized script the system has provided. And in the myth, that deviation takes you to Pleasure Island.
Right, the place with no rules. In the story, it's this chaotic island where boys indulge in their vices, they reject authority, they just smash things up.
Right.
But it's a terrifying trap. Because the longer they misbehave, they literally transform into donkeys, and then they are boxed up and shipped off to the salt mines for literal slavery.
Yeah, it's pretty dark.
So basically, the moment you stop saying thank you for dinner, society turns you into a pack animal and ships you to the mines. That escalated quickly.
It sounds absurd until you look at how systems actually treat non-compliant individuals.
Mm-hmm.
For the awakening adoptee, Pleasure Island represents what happens when the performance finally stops.
Okay.
When the adoptee starts setting boundaries, expressing grief, exhibiting depression, or simply refusing to play the grateful rescued child role anymore, the system's response is immediate dehumanization.
So it's a rigged game. If you step off the tightrope and express a genuine, messy, unfiltered reality, the narrative flips overnight.
Exactly, overnight.
The beautifully rescued child is instantly recast as the damaged, broken product of bad biological lineage. The system doesn't just reject you, it turns you into a donkey.
And the warning beneath the Pleasure Island dynamic is profound. The threat is this. If you do not maintain the mold carved for you, if you deviate from your utility to the system, you will be reduced to a beast of burden.
That's terrifying.
You will be forced to carry the weight of your own supposed pathology. And the most chilling insight the author drives home is that the beast was always your potential in the eyes of the system.
What can you explain that? What do you mean the beast was always your potential?
The transformation into a donkey wasn't a mistake or an accident. It was the system's underlying perception of you all along.
Oh, wow.
The moment you stopped being a useful, entertaining object, your underlying status as a lesser disposable commodity was revealed.
Wow. That strips the facade right off the benevolent savior narrative. It exposes the whole structure as transactional to its core.
It really does.
So if the system is this rigged, if the applause is a cage, if the fairies test is just a demand for compliance, and if stepping out of line turns you into a beast of burden, how on earth do you get out?
That's the big question.
Because if I remember the Disney fairy tale correctly, Pinocchio only becomes a real boy when he literally dies saving Geppetto. He fulfills his ultimate utility to his creator by sacrificing his own life, and then the blue fairy waves her wand.
Right.
But the author calls that a sanitized tragedy.
It is a tragedy because it reinforces the very system that objectified him. Dying for your creator's comfort is not liberation.
No, definitely not.
This essay demands a post-tragic reading. It offers a totally different conclusion based on agency and reconstruction.
Right. The text calls it cutting the strings. So how does a person actually do that? The author uses the phrase post-tragic self-authentication, which is a pretty heavy piece of academic phrasing.
It is a mouthful.
In plain English, does that just mean deciding you're good enough without anyone else's permission?
It does, essentially. But getting there is a rigorous three-phase process. True awakening isn't about finally winning the blue fairy's approval or perfectly satisfying Geppetto's emotional void.
Because that's impossible.
Right. It's realizing that the blue fairy scale is rigged to begin with. You cannot heal the system that fractured you by trying to be its perfect product.
So what is the first step then?
The author calls the first phase acceptance of the wood. This is a profound, unflinching acknowledgement that your history was altered.
Okay.
Your original records may have been amended or sealed. You were shaped by hands other than your own.
It's like looking in the mirror and saying, I am made of wood. I was carved. It's stopping the exhausting attempt to pass as someone who has never been broken or modified.
Precisely. It is the end of denial, which leads directly to the second phase, severing the mechanics. This is the active and frankly terrifying choice to drop the performance. You stop dancing for the applause of a society that demands your silence as the price of admission. You step out of Stromboli's theater.
I imagine that transition is incredibly brutal. I mean, you literally have to mourn the boy you were carved to be.
You really do.
Because for a long time, playing that role kept you safe. It got you the applause. It kept the peace at the holiday dinner table. Giving up that performance means stepping into a terrifying void where you don't even know who you are yet.
It is an agonizing void. But enduring that void is the necessary precursor to the final phase, self-authentication.
Okay.
This is the moment you declare yourself real, not because institutional authority validated you, not because an adoptive contract or the blue fairy said you finally earned it.
Right.
You declare yourself real because you possess the sovereign, inherent right to your own messy, complex, uncurated humanity.
So you just stop asking the blue fairy for permission to exist? You accept that your creation into this specific role may have been contingent on someone else's grief, but your existence in the world is not. Your existence belongs entirely to you.
And this raises a crucial point about the overall trajectory of this awakening. As the text makes clear, this isn't a single magical aha moment.
It takes time.
A lot of time. It is a sustained forensic confrontation with your own objectification, from recognizing you were carved to fill a void, to seeing the applause as a cage, to recognizing the rigged moral scale, to experiencing the threat of dehumanization.
Yeah.
The process is excruciating, but within that forensic recognition lies absolute, unassailable liberation.
Because you become something the original myth never even anticipated. You don't become a real boy based on their impossible rules.
No.
You become something so much more powerful. A self-authored being who has seen the strings, understood exactly how they work, and chosen to cut them anyway. It is the ultimate act of claiming your own life.
It completely shifts the paradigm. Under this framework, the adoptee is no longer a pathological subject failing to assimilate. They are an expert witness.
That's a great reframing.
They have unique, lived expertise in the mechanics of objectification, and they possess the exact knowledge needed to dismantle systems of conditional humanity.
Well, that brings us to the end of our journey today. We've walked through the architecture of a fabricated self, shifting a narrative of pathology into one of profound expertise.
It's been a deep one.
It really has. And for you listening, if this resonated, we strongly encourage you to seek out and read the full essay, The Pinocchio Archetype, a forensic analysis of adoptee awakening and objectified identity. To truly grasp the depth of this post-tragic framework, you really need to spend time with the author's words yourself.
Highly recommend it.
There is a quote near the end of the text that I think will stay with me forever. The only way out of the cage is to stop believing the cage is a stage.
It's a powerful mandate for all of us. And it leaves us with a vital question to consider as we close. If we recognize that these blue fairy dynamics exist strictly to protect the comfort of the system rather than the well-being of the individual, what other societal institutions, our workplaces, our schools, or even our biological families, are secretly using conditional humanity to ensure our quiet compliance?
Man, that's the real forensic reckoning, isn't it? Because at the end of the day, whether you're looking at a fabricated world in the Matrix or a fabricated self in Pinocchio, the first step to getting free is realizing the strings are there in the first place.